When's next Sunday?
When is next Sunday? About 4 days.
Maybe we could do communion on that.
Maybe so.
If our whole pack's here.
If our whole pack's here. Alright. Go ahead and start flipping to Acts 25. That's true. Thank you. Got both working? Acts 25.
Okay, before we get started,
Okay,
I need to write this down.
write this down.
The hierarchy. I know we talked about this last one, but I didn't write it down. So.
Okay.
Okay, so Felix, Festus, and all those people, tell me one more time how that hierarchy.
Okay. So you have at the highest
Let me get my place up.
Caesar.
Caesar, he's the number one.
Yes, Caesar, is a title taken from, Julius Caesar. So you capture the essence of Julius Caesar by taking his name. And so it's an emperor. So the emperor at this time is Nero, Claudius, Caesar, Augustus. One guy, multiple honorary names. So Augustus is also an honorary name, named for another, high-ranking Caesar, the August. And so when it talks about Augustus in verse 21, we're still talking about Nero. It's just one of his 4 names. So in the Roman pecking order, he to top.
Okay.
And then for our purposes, coming down to who has the Roman direct, oversight over this region is going to be what you could refer to as the governor. And that back in Jesus' day was Pilate. At the end of 24 was Felix, and he is going to be replaced by Festus.
Okay, so Pilate was a governor, Felix was a governor, and Festus, they all had the same title, just at
Different times. So Pilate would have been about 20 years ago, and then Festus and Felix were one after another. You would have the other military, personnel would be directly reporting.
Who would be directly under the governor?
As far as a specific breakdown, I don't know. I mean, whoever the top-ranking military folk would be reporting to him. But to Elliot's point, what makes it more interesting is that a feature of the Roman Empire is that they would often leave local individuals, royals or kings or whatever, with some kind of nominal power, some kind of self-government underneath this military overlordship. And so in that model, even though the governor here is most likely outranking, you still have this other local power of who's appointed by Rome, which is Herod, which is like our 4th Herod, so don't get confused. And so I think this would be Herod Agrippa II, and we'll also mention his sister, Bernice. And And so
So Bernice is his sister.
Bernice is whose sister?
Agrippa's.
See, I was thinking that Felix and Festus was like over Caesarea or whatever, and, over that little province or whatever. So actually it's taken on it.
Yeah, and if you were to look at like Herod Agrippa, his domain, changes over time. When he was younger, he had smaller, and then Caesar gives him more authority, and so it's in flux. But the idea is that you have someone who has a Jewish background and connection to that region, who has some position of authority by decree of the Roman Empire. Right? So we would, in other contexts, refer to these as like puppet kings, where yes, you have some power, but you're only there as long as Rome wants you to, not because you have military might or true sovereignty. And then religious leaders, right, would be under that, and particularly in Jerusalem, and in matters connecting to the temple, they would have a degree of autonomy and power there. So,
now, the high priests are no longer what they were originally. They're basically, I would say, political appointees.
of Rome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
They
even
change, if they fall out of favor with it, they change to another one.
yeah, under the original Levitical instructions, the high priest was a position filled by one guy for life, and that is very much gone away with. And if you're reading Josephus, for example, you will see how frequently Rome pulls and plays and swaps out high priest to secure favor or to punish or whatever. Just it became just like when you have a new administration, when you're making appointments, that became one of those appointed offices.
That would be why Paul didn't know that guy was a high priest, and they changed all the time. If it had been from the original, he would have known, because this guy's been a high priest forever. But how would he know?
Paul hadn't been in Jerusalem in at least 3 years, probably 4, and so it was genuine ignorance of not knowing this guy by sight.
But they were appointed by the Romans.
If you are in charge, you have a very religious, population that you're trying to control. What's more important than making sure that the top person in that is subordinate to you? Otherwise, that can cause a lot of trouble. All right. So, Paul has been in Caesarea, which is the port city. It's where the governors, that's where they primarily abide, named for Caesar. He's been there for 2 years. He had a certain amount of freedom, described as having liberty, so that he would forbid none of his acquaintance to come and minister unto him. So he could have people come and bring him stuff. He could visit with people and teach people. It's not like he was, in a dungeon, isolated, starving to death. Right? It was not that, but he was, in bonds. He was not free to leave the city if he wanted to, and probably not free to leave whatever building he was at.
That'd be equivalent to prison institution.
Yeah, this is white collar federal prison, maybe even nicer than that. But for 2 years he had been basically hung on to, because why get rid of a poker chip if you haven't played it? The governor thought he could get some money out of this guy. He hadn't really done anything worth being in bond, so you grease my palms, pay me a little bit, and I'll let you go. But Paul, being such a man of integrity, never offered him a bribe, and so he just continued to sat there until he became the next governor's problem. And that's really how Festus is going to view him is this is leftover homework from the previous guy, and I got to figure out what to do with him. So, he had been left in bonds, that governor doing a pleasure to the Jews. No sense ticking him off since he wasn't paying him anything. So, after 2 years, Festus comes into Felix's room. All right, so that means he walks into the same room as him? That means he takes his job. All right, so he had occupied the role of governor. Now, Festus is going to be instead of Felix. So, when Festus was come into the province, after 3 days, he ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Where did he come from before that? I don't know. We could speculate. Probably Rome. But either way, he's now appointed governor over this region down here, this province. He comes to town. He spends 3 days there at Caesarea. And then he ascends up to Jerusalem. All right, he makes that 60, 70-mile journey up in the mountains to, the most significant city in this region. Probably where the most problems are, too. And the first thing he hears about, and I'm speculating that, but the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed him against Paul and besought him and desired favor against him that he would send for him to Jerusalem, lying in wait in the way to kill him. Now, have the folks at Jerusalem, these chief priests and these high religious figures, have they forgotten about Paul? No. Now, I ain't seen him, at least from what we see, for 2 years, but he has definitely not fallen off their radar. They didn't get anywhere with the last governor, so we got a new bite at the apple. He comes up to town. First time he's there, there's a guy in prison. We would like you to bring him up to Jerusalem. And then, Luke tells us why. Or were they going to give him a fair trial? Were they even going to let him get to Jerusalem? No. Because why had he left Jerusalem? Because the plan had been 40 guys had committed a sacred promise that we ain't going to eat or drink until Bubba Gump is dead. Obviously, they weren't able to keep that promise. Right? 2 years later. But, anything within their power, they were trying to do. Well, here it is 2 years later, and they still are ready to conspire to underhandedly execute him. He is that much of a problem because he says that Jesus is not dead. That's the real core of it. So they informed him, so they laid a whole bunch of charges against him, and then asked the governor, please give us a favor. You just send him up here to Jerusalem. Let us watch him. Let us something. And they desired, because they were lying in wait to kill him. Festus answered, Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself would depart shortly thither. Let them therefore, said he, which among you are able, go down with me, and accuse this man, if there be any wickedness in him. All right, and so he gave a very political answer that he's in Caesarea. I'm about to go down there. If y'all want to talk about it, you come with me, and you can accuse him there. Being new on the scene, he's not about to get snookered into do anything. It's a very conservative response of, that's where he's at, that's where he'll stay. If he's done any wickedness, you can accuse him there. And so he stuck around in Jerusalem for another 10 days. He tarried among them more than 10 days. He went down to Caesarea, and we know that some of the elders would have gone. And the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. And when he was come, the Jews, which came down from Jerusalem, stood round about and laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. Right? Just like before with the previous governor, they had laid a whole bunch of stuff against him, but they didn't bring any witnesses to, actually verify these facts. And so it's just, baseless charges. And then Paul has an opportunity to answer for himself. Right? So imagine in court, the accuser's got his chance. They've They have they've thrown everything at the side of the barn wall to see what would stick. And then Paul has an opportunity to speak. He says, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar have I offended anything at all. All right, so you got these different layers of jurisdiction. I haven't done anything that would offend Caesar, that break Roman law. I haven't done anything in the temple, which they'd accused him of, and he obviously hadn't done when they accused him of bringing a Gentile into a portion that was forbidden from them, nor against the law of the Jews. Right? He hasn't done anything to offend, be worthy of offense. It says, but Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul and said, will you go up to Jerusalem and there be judged of these things before me? Right, so he is not saying the Jews are going to judge you up there. He's just, this is not really a change of venue so much as a change of location. So, will you agree to go to Jerusalem, and we'll talk about this some more, and I'll judge you up there. So Paul responds, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat. All right, Caesarea was the spot where Caesar's, judgment seat, where his courts were supposed to be held. Don't take me to some other spot where I ought to be judged. To the Jews have I done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. For if I be an offender, or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things whereof these accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal unto Caesar. So he recognized that to go up to Jerusalem was a death sentence. To be delivered unto them would be at his life. And so under Roman law, any Roman citizen had the right of an appeal. So if you have been adjudicated at a local level to prevent a local magistrate from abusing Roman citizens, a Roman citizen could appeal to a higher court, a higher authority, in which case it's to Caesar himself or Caesar's representative. And so being a Roman citizen, Paul had that right. He has been held by Rome at the Jews' request, but because of the Jews, but he's been held by Rome, and he's here in the Roman judgment seat, and now this governor is suggesting he go up to Jerusalem to be judged there, which he knows is going to result in his death. So he says, no one can turn me over because I haven't done anything. If I had, fine, execute me. That would be okay. But since I haven't, I'm appealing unto Caesar. So Festus, the governor, has to have a powwow. He talks with the council. That would be the Jewish elders who came down from Jerusalem, the ones that have just been charging him. And I would imagine the conversation went something like that work for y'all? I mean, he'll be out of here. He has to go to Rome. And so after they spoke, whatever their conversation was, he turns back to Paul and says, hast thou appealed unto Caesar? Let's just verify that. All right. Unto Caesar shalt thou go. You have elected to be sent away, be sent to Rome. All right. He's only been governor about 2 weeks. All right. He's already having to deal with this. The problem is he doesn't really know how to get rid of him. Okay? And it's going to be the rest of this letter, is that you got to send a note with your prisoner, explain to him what has he done. And right now, he don't know what to say. And so after certain days, King Agrippa and Bernice come unto Caesarea to salute Festus. So you have that other local authority power, again by Roman decree, are coming to welcome this governor, and they're going to hang out for a long time, happy that he's there, or at least making the show of it. And after they'd been there many days, this matter is going to come to Festus's mind, and he's going to ask him. He's going to ask Agrippa. Festus declared Paul's case unto the king, King Agrippa, saying, there's a certain man left in bonds by Felix, right? My predecessor left me some baggage here, about whom, when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priest and the elders of the Jews informed me, desiring to have judgment against him. All right, desiring to have judgment against him. We want him dead. That's what that translates to. To whom I answered, it is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die, before that he which is accused have the accusers face to face, and license to answer for himself concerning the crime laid against him. He says, no, we got to have a trial. I got to hear you as accuser. I got to hear his answer. This is the Roman way and law. Therefore, when they were come thither, so he's recounting what happened when they came down, without any delay, on the morrow I sat in judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought forth. Again, telling all of this so he looks good, right? I am upholding the letter of the law. I am doing what's right. Therefore, against whom, when the accusers stood up, they brought none accusations of such things as I had supposed. Right? What would you suppose? He murdered somebody. He stole somebody. He raped somebody, right? All those things that you would expect to be, we want capital punishment. But rather, they had certain questions against him of their own superstition, and of one Jesus, which was dead, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. All right, he's like, this is something amongst this guy's a Roman. He's not a Jew. He's not even been in the territory very long. He's like, something about their local stuff. They're bickering amongst themselves and about some particular guy named Jesus who he was dead, and now Paul says is alive, and they really don't like that. And, because I doubted of such manner of questions, I asked Paul whether he would go to Jerusalem and there be judged of these matters. He's like, I didn't really know what to do, so I'm just kind of buying time. Well, maybe we can go to Jerusalem and figure this out. But Paul had appealed to be reserved under the hearing of Augustus. He said, Paul had made this formal appeal to that he was going to be spared any judgment until he could be heard by, Caesar Augustus, Nero. So I commanded him to be kept till I might send him to Caesar. So he's still in bonds, right? So that's where we're at. Then Agrippa said unto Festus, I would also hear the man myself. Tomorrow, said he, thou shalt hear him. Right? So that was Festus responding. All right, you want to hear him? Good. We'll do it tomorrow. So on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice with great pomp, and was entered into the place of hearing with the chief captains and the principal men of the city, at Festus' commandment, Paul was brought forth. So you got this scene. This is not a trial. Not really. This is more of an examination by the king and Festus, because there's no accusers here this time. Right? They're all back in Jerusalem, but you've got this pomp and circumstance of, here come the king and his sister, and here you've got the governor, and you've got the principal people of Caesarea, and you've got the chief captains, right, your military leaders, and they're all gathered together to hear about this. And so Festus, you can kind of see this kind of flowery language as he's welcoming everybody. King Agrippa, and all men which are present with us, ye see this man, about whom all the multitude of the Jews have dealt with me, both at Jerusalem and here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. This is the circumstances. All these Jews are so riled up against him, and they're causing trouble to me, saying he needs to die. I've heard about it in Jerusalem. I've heard about it here. But when I found he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that he himself hath appealed to Augustus, I have determined to send him. This is the situation, all right? I didn't find anything worthy of death. He's appealed to Caesar. I'm going to send him, of whom I have no certain thing to write unto my Lord. Wherefore I have brought him forth before you, especially before thee, O King Agrippa, that after examination had, I might have somewhat to write. For it seemeth to me unreasonable to send a prisoner, and not withal to signify the crimes laid against him. Right? it doesn't seem good form to send a prisoner to Caesar and not be able to articulate what has he done. So that lays out the scene for the examination. You want to keep going? It's 35 after. It's pretty short. I mean, we're all teeing up this one conversation, so y'all are all good. We'll keep going. All right. So, again, there's no accusers here who are lambasting him, and so it's King Agrippa's got the task with figuring out what do we write in the letter to Caesar. And so Agrippa says unto Paul, "Thou art permitted to speak for yourself." All right. Basically, floor is yours. Explain what had happened. So Paul stretched forth the hand and answered for himself, "I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because I shall answer for myself this day before thee, touching all the things whereof I am accused of the Jews, especially because I know thee to be an expert in all customs and questions which are among the Jews. Wherefore I beseech thee to hear me patiently." So he is expressing that he is happy to have his case heard before someone who knows the backstory. Right? These things that he's going to talk about going back 20 years to Jesus, this would not be news to Herod. Right? So the new Roman governor who hadn't been here very long, doesn't know what about these superstitions we're talking about. Yeah, he may be in over his head. I've got a subject matter expert judge. Right? It's like when you go to a bankruptcy court, you've got a bankruptcy court judge because everything is so specific and nuanced. You don't want someone who's just doing criminal cases to be over bankruptcy, right? So it's like, I'm happy to have you listening because I know that you know what's going on. So please bear with me. It's going to take me a minute to talk through it, right? All right. My manner of life from my youth. I mean, it's going to take a minute to go back. He's going to go back to his childhood. All right. From my youth, my manner of life was at the first among mine own nation at Jerusalem. Know all the Jews. He said, everybody knows that from my youth I was there at Jerusalem among the Jews. And any which knew me from the beginning, if they would testify, that after the most straightest sect of our religion I lived a Pharisee. What does it mean to be the straightest sect, Connor? Most, well, straightest means narrow, but like they are so precise in how they are trying to keep the law. This was the most intense. They were, nothing about it was just haphazard. They were, if anyone was going to establish themselves by their own righteousness, it was the Pharisees who were trying to do it. Rigid, yep. Very, very dogmatic, ultra-orthodox, however you want to use the language. I was doing it, all right? I was living a Pharisee. He says, and now, so jumping forward, and now I stand and am judged for the hope of the promise made of God unto our fathers. Right? He believed the promises of God, and he believed that they had been fulfilled. He says, that's why I'm being judged, of that hope of the promise that God made unto our fathers the Jews, right? Abraham, Isaac, all those, unto which promise are 12 tribes, instantly serving God day and night, hope to come, right? Everybody among the Jews is hoping for the Messiah to come, right? That promise was coming. I stand here accused of that hope. For which hope's sake, King Agrippa, I am accused of the Jews, right? The belief that that hope had been fulfilled in Jesus is why he's being accused, right? And he asks him a question. Why should it be thought a thing incredible with you that God should raise the dead? Right? King Agrippa, he later will say, he knows that you believe the prophets, right? The power of God. Why should that be such a ludicrous thing in the power of God to believe that he has the ability to raise the dead? He says, I verily thought with myself, again, going back to how he used to conduct himself, I verily thought within myself that I ought to do many things contrary to the name of Jesus of Nazareth. He was an opponent. I thought that was what I was supposed to do. And not only did he think it, which thing I also did in Jerusalem and many of the saints did I shut up in prison, having received authority from the chief priests. And when they were put to death, I gave my voice against him. All right? So at their trials, he's willing to stand up, testify against them, and then the end result is they're dead. All right? He says, that's what I was doing. I was so contrary to the name of Jesus. And I punished them often in every synagogue and compelled them to blaspheme, right? Trying to force them to basically renounce the fact that Jesus is the Christ. And being exceedingly mad against them, I persecuted them even unto strange cities, right? He was so zealous in his hatred, he was willing to go to foreign countries, right? Damascus is not in Israel, that's in Syria. And whereupon, as I went to Damascus with authority and commission from the chief priest, which again, all of these things could be verified, right? I'm going at their behest at midday, O king, right? Why is he standing here? For the hope's sake? Well, at midday, I saw in the way, in the road, a light from heaven, above the brightness of the sun. Is the sun really bright, kids? Yeah, way brighter than that, shining round about me and them which journeyed with me. And when we were all fallen to the earth, so you can just see their company going, boom, I heard a voice speaking unto me and saying in the Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And I said, who art thou, Lord? He didn't know who was talking to him. And he said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. But rise, stand upon thy feet, for I have appeared unto thee for this purpose. Right? This is new material, right? We've heard the account of this event on the road to Damascus at least 2 times already. This is more information than we've gotten in the previous 2. I have appeared unto thee for this purpose, to make thee a minister, a servant, and a witness, both of these things which thou hast seen. All right, you're going to have to be an apostle of this moment, as Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, is appearing to you and talking to you now, and of those things in which I will appear unto thee. Is Jesus going to appear to him again? Yeah. Delivering thee from the people. Who are the people? The Jews. Delivering you from the Jews and from the Gentiles, unto whom now I send thee. I am making you a minister. I'm making you a witness. And both the Jews and the Gentiles are going to want to kill you. I'm going to deliver you from them. And I'm going to send you unto the Gentiles. Why? To open their eyes and turn them from darkness to light, right? The Gentile world was in just idolatry, right? So turning them from worshiping idols, from darkness to light, from the power of Satan unto God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and inheritance among them which are sanctified by faith that is in me. So this is radical, that he is being sent unto the Gentiles, and there's going to be a connection between all of God's people and Jesus by the faith that he gives them, and they will have this inheritance. Right? That's what I'm sending upon you. I'm sending you for a minister and a witness. Whereupon, O king, I was not disobedient unto the heavenly visions. I mean, you're talking to the king there. I saw a vision from heaven. Right? Jesus spoke to me and sent me. He says, I wasn't disobedient, but first showed unto them at Damascus. Where was he almost at when he had this vision? Damascus. Where did he start preaching? Damascus, right? First at Damascus, and then later, a couple years later, at Jerusalem, and throughout all the coast of Judea, and then to the Gentiles. And what was his message? His message, here's a summary of the gospel. That they should repent and turn to God and do works meet for repentance. All right? Change your thinking, turn to God, change your conduct. Works meet for repentance. It says, for these causes, this is why the Jews caught me in the temple and went about to kill me. Having therefore obtained help of God, I continue unto this day, right? God spared my life from the Jews because they were going to kill me at Jerusalem 2 years ago. He's continued to spare me up and through this. He has been delivering me out of their hands all this time, not to mention all the other times he's been tried to be killed at all the various cities, right? Having therefore obtained the help of God, I continue, which means I'm alive, unto this day. And what am I doing? Witnessing both to small and great, right? Your common individual and to kings and queens, witnessing, saying none other things than those which the prophets and Moses did say should come. What did they say should come? That Christ should suffer, and that he should be the first that should rise from the dead, and should show light unto the people and to the Gentiles. That's why I'm here, because I believed what Moses and the prophets said, and I've been witnessing it. And so he's gotten to this point in speaking for himself, and the new governor just kind of makes fun of him. As he thus spake for himself, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, thou art beside thyself. Much learning doth make thee mad. You're out there seeing visions and lights and dead people talking to you. You spent so much time studying your books, you have cracked your pot. You're nuts. Literally just writing him off. This man, obviously he's learned. He knows a lot about, their superstitions and their scripture, but you're crazy. This was too incredible for him. And Paul responds, I am not mad. I'm not crazy. Most noble Festus, right? Very polite term for the governor. But speak forth the words of truth and soberness. I am clear-headed in this. I am speaking true and sober-mindedly. Right? It says, for the king knoweth of these things. Right? Agrippa knows the backstory. He knows about Jesus. Before whom also I speak freely. Right? I'm not holding anything back. I'm willing to speak boldly. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him. For this thing was not done in a corner. Right? We're talking about Jesus there. Right? For 20-something years, this has been known and talked about, and you've had believers and the growth of the church. This was not done in a corner. This was not a secret powwow. You've got to be a member of the initiate to hear about it. And he turns to King Agrippa and says, King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets? Right? Do you believe what the prophets say are true? I know that thou believest. Right? So it may have been almost a rhetorical question of, I know you believe. And so, the implication there is, if you believe the prophets, and I'm telling you, the prophets have, what they've said has come true, and it's in the person of Jesus. That's when Agrippa says, then Agrippa said unto Paul, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. Like, this is interesting stuff. You've almost gotten me there that, there may be something to this. All right? And then Paul very politely answers. He says, I would to God, here's what I really desire, that not only thou, but also all those that hear me this day, all these lords and ladies, all the chief captains, all the chief men of the city, that they all who heard me were both almost, right, just as much as you, and yet altogether such as I am, fully convinced, fully persuaded, except these bonds. Right? I'm not asking that any of y'all be put in chains. Right? I want you to be in the same position I am of believing this to be true. I don't want to be offensive and say, I wish you were all like me and that you were in jail. And when he had thus spoken, the king stands up and the governor stands up and Bernice and they that sat with him. So that's kind of the end of the audience, and they go off to the side and they talk by themselves and they say, this man, he's done nothing worthy of death or of bonds, right? He'd been left in bonds for 2 years. He's not even worthy to be in jail, much less killed. And then Agrippa said unto Festus, King Agrippa, this man might have been set at liberty if he had not appealed unto Caesar. And we're kind of in a pickle as far as what to do with him, because if he hadn't appealed unto Caesar, we could just let him go free. But since he had appealed unto Caesar, I don't think a local magistrate had the right to overrule that appeal, and so it's the wheels are already turning, right? Once you get the bureaucratic wheels going, you're going to go to Caesar, which is exactly where Paul said back before he left Ephesus to go on his final, saying goodbye trip, that he planned on going to Rome, and then where Jesus had appeared to him and says, "You're going to Rome," and so it is definitely okay. Be of good cheer. Yeah. So back when he was still at Jerusalem, before the 40 had lied in wait, the Lord had appeared to him and said, "As you testified to me, Jerusalem, as you have testified to me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome." And knowing that may have been part of the reason that Paul did appeal into Caesar. He knew that was where the Lord was expecting him to go anyway.
Well, he was so at peace with it because he knew God promised, "I'm going."
Yeah.
If we could take that study enough to realize what those promises are to us and rely on that, we could have that peace.
Yeah. All right. 25, 26. Next week we'll pick up with him shipping out. It'll be a wild trip. This is not a cruise you'd want to go on.